Okay, so is there a motion for the minutes?
I motion.
Okay, Beth motions. Who seconded?
I'll second.
Okay, Sarah second. So that was a Beth and a Sarah. Okay, is there any further discussion? Wendy, I just have to say that I love the layout of these minutes and the ease of reading, and I'm just still like, that was so fast to just go through and understand exactly what we did in the meeting.
Yeah, they're great. Thank you. I agree.
Yeah. And I have to say that sometimes, like, since we're meeting, I personally feel like I'm in a meeting every Monday, because I think I have been for over the last month. And going through this actually makes me realize that we are making progress in the world. Because sometimes every Monday I just feel like we're all here again. And like, there actually was progress, and between like today's meeting, or yes, the last meeting, and what we're going to talk about today. So that to me just felt good. Okay, so if there's no further discussion, I will take a vote. So all those in favor of approving the minutes of December 21st, 2020, please say aye. Raise your hand. Aye. Okay. And all those opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, so that would be a 5-0 approval. Okay, moving on to public participation. I do not see any public on the meeting. So I guess
Nikki, excuse me, because David owns the meeting. If anybody's oh, he's here. He just muted himself. Okay, so he can watch that.
Okay. Yeah, David, do we have any public trying to get in? I haven't gotten any texts or emails. Okay. Okay. So Ed's here. Perfect. So we'll move on to our items of discussion, which would be the 2022 budget report.
Wait, what about
oh, yes.
customary changes or additions to the agenda?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Any changes? Thank you. That's not on here. So Wendy, can we add that just as a savior for me? Just changes or additions to the agenda, so I remember to say it.
I literally just said I'm going to streamline all of the agendas so they all have all the same body parts for everyone.
Awesome.
Awesome.
I don't know where that goes. So what I would, Christine has something to say.
Well, I would say that I put the COVID updates in my principal's report every time, so I don't know.
Okay. So we'll reorder that. And then I know that we have a short SRO update.
Yep.
So I'll just add that at the end. It's very short though.
Also in my report.
Oh, well then I won't add it. Okay.
So my point for wanting to stick that in there and make sure we did that was it's been customary to have an executive session at issues this time of the year, because
what's that sound?
Anyways, it might include talk about employees. I wondered if we could do that tonight at some point. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I put myself on mute. We didn't warn an executive session. And I don't know what the rules are there. Is anybody else? I think we have to warn it.
I don't know about that. I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. And David's missing. Okay.
I can text David and ask him.
Yeah, that would be great, Christine.
I think you can't take action on something that hasn't been warned, but I think you can have a discussion. That's what my understanding, anyway.
Okay. Okay, so that sounds okay. We'll wait for confirmation from David. So we'll add a tentative
Yeah, that would be another thing possibly for Wendy's, I forgot the word she just used, but the body parts of
Right, the standard format for an agenda. Yeah, I made a note.
tentative executive.
Awesome.
Right.
Thank you, Wendy and Scott. If it's not in front of me, it's okay.
Oh no, I wasn't commenting on that.
No, but it's true.
No,
okay.
That's my
So,
life.
so I think, is there any other additions or changes? Okay. Okay. So we'll move on to the budget from Ed. Thank you, Christine.
Ed, do you want me to present my screen? I'm assuming he does because he's on a phone, so I'll just get
I know. Okay.
Let's see.
Hey, Nikki, you're probably going to have to mute, though.
I think it's Scott that is making that noise. No? Okay. Window, let's see.
I did tap my pencil. Was that the problem?
I mean,
No, it's this really loud, like, sound that
Sounds like someone's vacuuming at your house.
Yeah, it does. It sounds like a vacuum cleaner.
Really?
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, you can. Okay. Ed?
Yes.
I don't know if you... Do you want me to share the spreadsheet or the spreadsheet in the Google Slide format? What's your preference?
Either one's fine. Just the information's pretty much the same as it was the last time we met. The only thing that's different now is that we've got a tax rate.
Okay, so do you want me to go to the stats tab?
Well, really, I want to know if there's anybody out there that has questions around the budget.
Okay.
What now you know the rate. The rate's going to be 13.64 or what is it?
Here it is.
Yeah, it's 13.64 cents per thousand is going to go up. And then at the last one, the tax scenario shows you how that affects houses of different values. So the last stat, like if you go to the homestead tax rate and you go down to a $400,000 house, if you look at how much more a taxpayer in that bracket is going to have to pay, it's $546. And then down below that, there's dollars needed for tax decreases. And to get to where it would be a zero increase, you'd have to cut $459,990. So what's happened between the last time we met and tonight is that I got all the inputs. As you can see from the stats page, that means that I got in your equalized pupil, which is up 2.21% or 10.03 students. And then your common level of appraisal is down very slightly. Now, what also affects you that I'm not showing you at this point is that the property yield and the income yield that are both set at the state level. Those I didn't show you because it comes on an Act 130 spreadsheet, but suffice to say they're both significantly higher than last year, which means the tax rate's going to go up. Excuse me, I got that backwards. They're down from last year, so that means the tax rate will go up. So, for instance, if you could educate a student for what the income yield is, which is $10,763, right? Well, that's the property yield, I'm sorry. The property yield is $10,763. If you educate a student for $10,763, then your tax rate would be $1. Okay. Anything over that moves it up, meaning moves the tax rate up. So if you look at your tax rate, it's about 87% above that 10,763. So in that same sheet, you can see what your per pupil rate is. $19,787.70. That's higher than the excess spending threshold, which is 18,789. So right now, you are $484 over the yield or the penalty. So that $484 gets added directly to that 19,787, and it adjusts your per pupil rate up to 20,871 or 271.79. You pay, that's a penalty that you're paying in addition to your tax rate.
Ed, can you go through that again? So our per pupil spending this year is 19,787.
Right.
Okay, and then, but we're only allowed 18.
No, you're only allowed 17,000. No, excuse me, 18,789.
Is that a state number or our number?
Yeah, that was one of the numbers I was looking to have them send me so that I could do the calculations. They do that number.
But they do it per town, or is it the same across the board?
It's statewide. Keep in mind that when you're talking about the tax rate, there's no such thing as town. It's all state, because all funding comes from the state. Your property taxes are essentially part of the state ed fund. And because you don't raise enough locally, you take money in addition to your local property taxes from the state ed fund. So none of the money that you're talking about here is local per se. The numbers that you generate that you use to generate your tax rate are all numbers that are going to tell you how much your local rate's going to be. So yeah, you're over the threshold.
So I'm struggling. You said that we're 400 over the threshold, but that
right,
doesn't.
Because what I was able to do is you have some exceptions that you can throw at it. For instance, all tuition students that are based on that are any tuition students that you had that were in there before your last census, you could take the total of that out. So for you guys, that was $190,000. So they take that number, they take the special ed costs in excess of 50,000, and they take payments to the new state ed, the Vista system. Those are all what they call exclusions to excess spending provision. And those exclusions, you total them, then you divide by the equalized pupil, and you're able to take that number out of the 19,787.70. That's why you're only $484 over, because we were allowed to take out some of those exceptions. If we hadn't had any exceptions, it would have been an additional $998.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was calculating myself.
So when you look at it, what they're doing when they start the tax formula is they're comparing your per pupil, which after the penalty is added is $20,271.79. And it's saying, okay, let's look at the property yield, tax yield, which is $10,763. You're pretty much, you're 88% higher than that. So that's where you start the calculation. Then it gets adjusted down a little bit because your CLA is a little over 100%. And that's where you come up with the tax rate that you have down below, which is the 1.8723.
So I just want to say publicly that I don't think any school district in the state is educating somebody for $10,000.
Oh, no.
So I just didn't want that to be like, that's what our goal is.
I just wanted to give you an idea of where. So the property tax yield, those are numbers that when we get, the legislative session has just started. So last year when we did this, a whole bunch of stuff happened after you said yes to the budget. I mean, they changed the equalized pupil. They changed the income and the income and the income and property yields. They changed both of those. So there's a bunch of things that they can do between now and then. So when I give you a tax rate right now, it's at best an estimate. And in addition, since our last meeting, this Friday is the deadline for all schools in New Hampshire and Vermont, to give us what they call the announced tuition for the next year. So now FY22, which is next year's announced tuition, is going to be, we're going to get those figures at the end of this week. So I would be able to refine your budgets a little bit better based on those numbers. It could go up, it could go down, but what I've done is I've taken what they announced for FY21, the year we're in, and added 2.5%. In the case, when I did that for, say, Hartford, the tax rate went to like 17,790, but when they announced 18,900. So their tuition went up almost 10%.
Which has been adjusted in the budget.
Yes, it was adjusted in the budget. And that was driving Christine a little crazy because every time she turned around, I was changing something.
Whose tuition went up 10%?
Hartford. And you have probably 2/3 of your students going there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
I can't get a number from Hanover or Richmond. They won't announce their tuitions till March at the earliest. And they're the second one. I couldn't get one from Woodstock either.
How do they justify going up 10%? Did they say?
Yeah, for about 25 minutes. I mean, I had a conversation with their business manager at length, and he said that they went through the numbers over and over again, and that was what they came up with. But I think what's happening along a lot of the state is that everybody's competing for the same students. The infrastructures are the same, and student enrollments are going down, so tuitions go up. There's really no break on that either, meaning there's no state saying you can't go above this, you can't do this. They can do pretty much whatever they want. Like we announced 18,245 for Windsor.
Does the town of Hartford pay that same tuition? Is it?
No, because their students are a member of they don't pay tuition. They just go to the school.
But they have that equalized pupil rate.
Yes.
But it's not necessarily going to translate to what we outsiders pay.
No.
Okay.
Does anybody else have questions for Ed? I just, before we move on, I just wanted to express frustration that they decreased the non-homestead tax rate. I just find that challenging for those of us that actually live in the state, that people that have houses here are paying less than we do.
Oh, I don't think that's true. The tax rate for homesteads went up by almost went up.
It went down.
Yeah, yours went down. That's right. I'm not sure why that happened.
The non-homestead tax rate went down.
Yeah. Let me just check something.
What is a non-homestead tax? What is a non-homestead?
It's a second home.
Oh,
No, you know what?
because it's not your homestead.
Ed, I hope
That's wrong.
that's a mistake. It could be in our
Yeah,
favor.
that's a mistake. Their tax rate is 1.8324. I'm sorry.
Does that change everything?
No, it doesn't change. It just changed what the increase there. So the non-homestead tax rate went up by 9.65 cents. So that would just be the 1.8324 less the 1.7359 is 9.65 cents.
How much did the homestead tax rate change last year?
Well, last year's was 1.7359. Or you want to know percentage?
Oh, I see them right here. I'm sorry. I can figure that out myself.
So the non-homestead tax rate is supposed to be the average of all of the people in the state, correct?
Yeah, but it's the non-homestead tax rate is the same for everybody. The non-homestead tax rate set by the legislature went up 10 cents, which is, it went from 1.63 to 1.73. And then it gets adjusted by the equalized pupil and all of that.
Okay, so I feel like I want to get into, so these are all things that we don't have control over, but this is helpful information to give us an idea of how the tax rate is gonna, like what our budget does to our taxpayers. I was gonna switch to the account summary page. And I just wanted to kind of discuss publicly what the big differences are. So,
Do you want me to present that?
yeah, if you want to share that again, that's good. It'd be good to have it on the recording. Do I still have a fan going?
Nope, you're good.
It's been silent in here the whole time. It's really weird. Okay. So looking at the first line under wages, we're going up 120,000. And that is due to the new contract. And that's the contract that we just settled, plus some estimated amount for what would happen in the future. Is that correct, Ed?
It went up because we settled the FY21, the year we're in, contract. So rather than speculating what it was going to be, we now know. And in the case of Heartland, they got an increase in the base, but in addition to that, instead of getting one step, they got 2 steps. And that was because, Scott?
Go ahead, Scott.
I didn't know you wanted me to speak. Okay. That was the negotiated deal. It had to do with the exchange, you might say, to enable or to facilitate everyone getting on the same page around work day across the union, across the supervisory union. And it was most of a change in contract language for the Heartland Association. And so there was a difference in the rewards, you might say, that came out of that negotiation for the Heartland teachers. And that's what Ed's saying. So way back when we had not settled a contract yet, everyone across the supervisory union, licensed teachers, got a step on their wage schedule. And so that has stayed. And then when we in the course of the mediation, there was some additional movements made, and that's when Heartland gained another step in turn for the change that was made in the Workday language.
Thank you. That does make sense. I was just surprised to see that it was 4.95, because I thought that it was more of a 3%, but that would be 3% at the SU level, and then it ended up being 4.95 in Heartland because of that extra step.
I don't want to diminish it. I'm trying to speak very matter of factly. It is a huge difference in Heartland, as opposed, it's a huge difference right now for this FY22 discussion, and it was a big deal, and it was a tough thing for the negotiation team to get their head around, but that's where we ended up.
I think, I mean, we're looking at it financially. It's also a big deal in, I know it was a big deal for our administration to get on the same page as the rest of the supervisory union. So right. I think that it's really important, and we're seeing the finances of that importance right here.
Yeah, I keep telling myself exactly that, Nikki. So
yeah, no, and that's the trade-off that we chose to make at the time, but now we're actually looking at those numbers. So looking through, benefits goes up a bit, which I believe is largely related to healthcare. Contracted services goes down a fair bit.
Well, as far as the benefits are concerned, it is healthcare, but in addition to that, when you have higher wages, you have higher FICA. So it would, if you look back and you make a comparison, it's the same comparison as the wages. All of the benefits that you have, that goes from life, disability, health, dental, all of those are subject to an increase. Some of them are based on actual wages. So when their wages go up in a significant way, like yours did, then yes, you're going to see a subsequent increase in your benefits as well.
Thanks, Ed.
You're welcome.
Okay, so to keep going through, contracted services is a fairly good decrease of almost 38,000.
Yeah, that's We Are Hope, isn't it, Christine?
No, that was a regular ed BI mostly.
Okay.
Some professional development outside services that we were going to actually use this. That was 7 Habits. I'm forgetting the name of the organization, and
Leader in Me, Christine.
Leader in Me and Big Picture Learning. So we've taken those out for next year as well. Let me get my screen back up. There you go.
Okay, so then continuing to go through, maintenance and repair is down 15.5. And I believe that was moving a lot of that to the SU level, correct?
Well, actually, no. What it was is typically we will do things that we have plans, projects. We didn't plan any projects this year. There's nothing in there for projects. It's pretty much status quo this year.
Okay, thank you. But I'm not incorrect in saying that we're kind of costing. They're coming out of the Heartland budget, but we're costing them at the SU level. So in theory, there should be somewhat greater purchasing power there.
Yeah, you guys are part of it. I mean, we buy through the. There's a buying group that's all of the states, or a lot of the states, operations and maintenance divisions. They all buy as a group. But what you don't do is we have not centralized operations and maintenance to the SU, like say we have special ed, for instance. You still have costs for your employees at your schools. Like food service, for instance, is now at the SU, right? So you get a percentage of the projected shortfall in food service goes back to Heartland. but the maintenance and repair budget is all at your school. So each budget is an individual budget.
Yeah. So then we see an enormous decrease in transportation, and that is pretty much what you said. We moved transportation to the SU. So our transportation costs are not changing. They're just showing up in the assessment instead of in the transportation line.
Correct.
So then moving forward, a slight increase in communication and postage. And is that insurance too?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then tuition goes up pretty substantially. We're seeing a $200,000, almost $207,000 increase in tuition. And so part of that is Hartford's 10% increase. And then we also ended up with more students going into high school this year than we had previously. Is that correct, Christine?
Yes. In addition, like I said, your tuition for Hartford went up 10%. And that's where a lot of your students go to school.
We don't have more
Christine, you're breaking up.
Christine, it might be better if you're on the budget spreadsheet. I think your bandwidth is being taken up by displaying videos of us. Okay, and we'll come back to tuition. I think we lost Christine for a second. Although it'd be nice to get her screen back. Okay, so the next is travel. And we had an increase of $2,000, and I believe, isn't that related to the transportation moving to the SU? So there's a little bit in field trips there. There's Christine.
Sorry, I keep losing service. So are you still on high school tuition? That's where I lost you last time.
Yeah, we moved on to travel, but just so you know, travel's not related to student transportation. Travel's primarily for, say, guidance counselors or for teachers who are doing professional development and they have to go somewhere. Those are the costs associated with that kind of travel rather than student transportation. They're two different things.
Thank you, Ed. I got confused there. Okay, Christine, back to tuition.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know where you left off, but we are sending fewer students than we are graduating, but we are making up for I think we had 9 move-ins in the previous year. So we're adjusting the budget to accurately reflect the number of high school students that we have total next year.
Keep in mind with your tuition, you're comparing what you budgeted for in FY 21, what you actually budgeted for in the fall of FY. Oh God.
I know, it gets confusing.
Yeah.
It
FY 20. The fall of FY 20, which was prior to COVID. What Heartland and Wethersfield have seen subsequent to that is a large amount of students that moved in that weren't necessarily students that were going K through 8. There were some K through 8 kids, but a lot of kids came in that were in high school. Heartland's an attractive Upper Valley town because of choice.
So we currently have 9 kids who we are paying tuition for right now that are not in our budget, that are not in our 2021 budget.
And we had 2 8th graders move in today. So it happens all the time.
And Colleen, I remember Colleen a couple meetings ago wanting to put in extra money for tuition. Now, here's the conundrum, Colleen. Anything we put in at this point is going to increase your tax rate beyond the 13.64 cents. So this is what we're faced with every year. it used to be that you could throw them in and it wouldn't be that big an increase, but now it is an increase, and it does have a significant impact on your budget.
So what you're saying, Christine, is that we actually are going to have 11. Well, no, we'll have 2 more new students that aren't even in this budget since they just moved in today.
That would be the assumption that I would make, unless 2 move out, which could happen.
Yeah. It's like a constant game of catch up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see that the impact it's having, even if you look at that the tab that says stats, and you take a look at the second one, homestead tax rate, and you compare what the projected FY22 tax rate is compared to FY20, which was 2 years ago, or not even, there's a 29-cent increase there. And you could see prior to that, you were running at 1.55, 1.5540, 1.5857. Then last year it jumps to 1.7359, and now it's 1.8723.
And are those students included in our equalized pupil count or no?
Your equalized pupil count is not it's not about how many kids you have in the given year. It's a 3-year average. But will it show up? Yeah, in 3 years.
It's so helpful. Okay. It's just, it feels like we're on a treadmill. Okay, so we talked about travel, and that's primarily professional development. Assessments is a dramatic increase, but the bulk of that is the transportation, and then the other part of that is special ed. Is that correct, Ed? Primarily?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me go.
Okay, so 100 if you subtract out the transportation, our assessment is going up by 128,000, which is primarily special.
I just want to make sure that that's correct. I can look at another spreadsheet for that, but I just have to pull it up.
The special ed increase. It's not all special ed. It's other SU assessment.
Right.
Money as well, but special ed is the majority of that assessment.
Okay, Katie's here if you want her to speak to it.
Yeah, Katie, you want to speak up on that?
Sorry, Katie, put you on the spot, but I know you know the budget.
So our budget went up a total of, from last year, I want to say it was 2.9. I didn't pull it up to put it in front of me. And most all of our increase was due to what we anticipated for salary increases. I had to come up with my budget before we settled. And when I submitted, because the service plan's due in October. So it looks like we're set there. We didn't add anything new in for any positions. We've got some shuffling around of positions. I think one of the things that was a bit of a guesstimate was transportation and the tuition costs for our out-of-district kids. The last time Ed spoke, he talked a little bit about the assessment looks much higher than our actual increase because of the decrease in number of students that we receive reimbursement for, because we have fewer students being placed out of district, in part because we just have fewer students needing to be placed out of district, which is kind of cool. But that means that we carry more of that on ourselves because there's less reimbursement. So, but most of everything was pretty much status quo. I think the only question I had from the SU board, which people might notice, there was a significant increase in the cost of support staff, if you look at the paraprofessional line, but that is offset by the significant decrease in purchase professional services line, because we went from having HRSBIs and staff to almost exclusively our own. So that was just a shift in cost versus an increase, which has certainly, I have to say, helped greatly this year for the flexibility of all those new staff members being able to work with a range of kids. For lack of a better term, we get a much bigger bang for our buck because they are able to work with multiple students instead of just one or two, maybe. So in practice, that's come out really well. I haven't heard any drawbacks yet. I'm sure there's some. I just haven't heard them.
And Katie, I also want to say thank you that you got a handle on that. The special education increase this year is nothing like what we've seen in last year's.
So one of the things I want to make, so you asked me about the assessment. So there's 3 assessments that are in that 367, which is the increase that you're looking at in that account summary. 44,338 of that is for early childhood. And when we did the SU presentation, that was primarily due to the fact that we increased the tuition that we're mandated to pay for as students significantly. I think it went from 300 to close to 400 to close to 500. And that got dispersed amongst all the schools. And your increase on that was 44,000. The next one is the business office. Now the business office is up 198,701, but there's 239,000 you see as a drop in transportation. That's in the business office assessment, okay? So the business office was 198, and then special ed, their increase for Heartland was 124,190. So when you add those 3 numbers together, that's the 367,229.
Right, and I was just trying to do it quick and dirty, taking out the transportation assessment, which kind of gets you to the same place. Okay, so I think we've got a handle on assessments, unless anybody has any questions. I know not all of you were part of the SU meetings. Okay.
I had a question on the assessments. Unless you want to go to you want to keep going to the bottom of the list? So you want to do?
That's my intent, but
Okay.
Okay. Do you want to ask at the end of the list or now?
Sure, I'll wait till you get
Okay.
down.
Okay. So excess cost, that's the special education cost that we pay to high school tuition or towns that we tuition to.
No, that's the regular education cost you spend. So there's special ed, and that's
Okay.
there's a whole nother realm of special ed excess cost that we don't have time for tonight. But with the
So this
regular,
is regular and excess cost.
yes. So your kid, if your kid's not on an IEP, or your student's not on an IEP, he's paying regular ed, he or she's paying regular ed tuition. If there are services that they use that are beyond the scope of the tuition, they have to pay regular ed excess cost. And
So those would be a lot of students that are on 504s.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's K-12, correct, Ed? Those are services for K-12. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. But then again, it's a decrease and it's quite minor in comparison to this entire budget. Okay, moving on. Supplies and textbooks. I know that Christine cut as much as she possibly could from the supply lines, and that's laudable, and I hope that it's workable. So, but I appreciate your effort there, because that sometimes feels like the only thing that we have a lot of control over. Okay, energy. Energy is also decreasing, which is good. Ed,
Yeah, we
got
got a really good price on oil.
Awesome. Okay, that's what that is. Okay, equipment is also a reduction, although we don't have a lot of equipment to begin with. And then dues and fees. Yeah, go, Christine.
Ed, confirm, I think the copier contracts are at the SU level now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Savings there.
About that. Okay, and then dues and fees is also a decrease. But it's a minor budget item, and I don't really understand what
we took a lot. We zeroed out dues and fees for library and media.
Right, because you moved that to the SU level as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I remember that conversation at the SU level, that it made sense for not, it made sense to centralize that so that every school wasn't paying duplicate fees. So that's fantastic. Okay, and then the transfer to the food program. And the way I read that is that the food program is doing better than we had originally estimated.
Well, every year is a separate, I mean, well, I don't have to say, it's a different budget year. So when we put the budget together, I sat down with Craig and we put all the numbers together. What we do is we have an estimated amount of revenue. We have estimated expenses. And then what we do is we take the revenue and we subtract out the expenditures. And then there's always a shortfall in it in the food service program. So that becomes essentially the transfer that you have to make from the general fund to the food program. And this particular year, after we did that, and then we also went with an equalized pupil number. So that's why you're paying a little less. Windsor's paying more. It's because in the past, what we were doing is we were doing it as individual school districts. Now it's a combined deficit and we parse it out by equalized pupil.
And I know I meant to ask this a long time ago, but is it parsed out by equalized pupil? So like, are our high school students included?
Well, yeah, we do all of the assessments by equalized pupil. I mean, one of the things that years ago we tried to get away from was formulas that I had created for all of the assessments. And it was agreed at the time to do equalized pupil. So that's the way we've been doing all of we're looking at this essentially as an assessment.
Yeah, but Ed, those were the days before a supervisory union food program. And
yep,
so
Scott, I would be more than welcome any kind of
David said he was going to look at the way that we would assess the food program, and it wasn't necessarily going to be via equalized pupil for exactly the reason that Nikki brought up. There's a huge share of the Wethersfield and Heartland students that aren't utilizing the food program.
And can't. Like we have 160 students that can't access the food program that we're paying for.
Right.
Well, and also we're paying tuition to other schools, which has that included in it. So we're sort of, it's that double, well, we've talked about that before. It's the double pay thing with the assessment.
Okay, so whatever formula you guys want to use, you let me know. I don't know what other formula we could use because we don't know how many kids are going to participate in a given year until the year's over.
Well, it was just that Dr. Baker said that was something that he and you were going to look at.
Well, I can look at it and I can come back with another number, but no one has said to me, and that includes Dr. Baker, that we were going to change that number. My understanding was that number was going to be what we did this year, and we'd look at it in the next year. But if you want to look at it this year, I certainly can do that. I just need to know how you want to do it.
But just to be factually correct, because this is a public meeting, I don't want people to think that years ago when I was on the supervisory union board and gunning for the equalized pupil mode of assessment, those were the days when school districts had their own food programs. And it was a little bit of a different landscape, and it's a better system now, but perhaps this needs a little looking at because of the nature of two of the districts. So it's just it's complicated.
Yeah, very complicated.
Does it seem fair or reasonable to use the previous year's end of year numbers? Again,
I will use whatever numbers you want. You just let me know what you guys want. We could use Power School numbers from any month you want. You just tell me the month, and I'll use those numbers.
But we can't make that decision because that's a supervisory union decision. So we can't say use those and then screw somebody else or something. So we really, this is a supervisory union decision, not a Heartland decision.
Right, and I can tell you that Windsor's is up $53,000, and yours is down 4.
Yeah, but Windsor's is up. That's accurate, but inaccurate at the same time. It's up that much because they actually are started brand new, and their staffing was also significantly different than the previous year. So it's not apples to apples.
Okay.
Right, and I mean, to take, like, if you look at our actuals from 2020, we're up 70,000. So that doesn't, like, so when we were operating with just Weathersfield, I just, it's hard because I do feel like we're subsidizing more than our school, but that is how it works when we go to
Your sound is back, Nikki.
I don't hear whirring from Nikki.
I think it's Beth.
I think it's Beth this time. It's definitely Beth this time.
Okay. That is just so weird that our speakers are so sensitive now that they're picking up things that we don't even hear in the room.
It is the fan in my computer when it goes on.
Ah, interesting. Okay. Okay, so I think it's important. I'm frustrated here. I feel like it's unfortunate that it's set this way, but I also feel like every school is voting on this today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. And I don't know what to do with that. So I'm throwing that back at you guys.
Why wouldn't we just use the number of students in the building? That seems strange to me that you would count students that aren't in any of the SU buildings. And that's a very simple formula, right? Just the number of kids at Heartland plus the number of Heartland kids who go to Windsor.
The counts fluctuate every month.
And this is a
And
incredible.
not all kids use the
The
same.
yearly average. I mean, couldn't you do
Yeah, there's got to be
yearly
an
average?
average though.
Yeah, but again, I can come up with an average. It's just what months do you want to average?
And do you want to count, remote only students? Because some are getting lunch and some are not. It's an incredibly complicated year.
Do you want to count kids that are actually participating, or do you want to count total student count?
We have to do total student count because participating or not, that they have the option of food.
Right.
I'd say average for a school year.
Right.
Even if you have to cross across fiscal budgets.
So is that the Power School number at the end of fiscal year 21?
Sure.
That'd be fine.
I don't think it matters. I would just pick a number. I mean,
It'd
we
be
have
great to see what it looks like at least.
like 280 students in our building, but we have 450 in our district. So it's a really big increase. It's a big difference, but it's going to make a huge change on Windsor's. Which, are you presenting that tomorrow?
Not necessarily. I mean, it could be that you're just taking the numbers down to where they would be. It might reflect the exact same percentages. You never know. If you just take the kids in the building in Windsor, do you take K through 12 with the tuition kids?
No, because we pay. So we're taking credit for our tuition kids who go to Windsor because that seems fair, but then they don't get counted in the Windsor High School count.
Well, they're students at the building, so they could go to lunch there.
Right, that's true. So yeah, maybe that's where they get counted. And we're paying tuition, I suppose. That's a little tricky, but
there's not how many kids. Yeah, just count them on one side or the other. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, like, do you count the Cornish kids? Do you count kids that come from other schools other than Heartland and Weathersfield?
Yes.
Yeah. I would count kids in the building because Cornish they're paying tuition.
But you wouldn't want to count the Heartland kids in Windsor and in Heartland. You got to pick one or the other.
Right. And it, because we're paying tuition, I think you guys are right. It's fair to count them as Windsor responsibility.
I think thinking it as where do they eat lunch, I think would probably be the easiest way to lay it out. And so, but in the end, you know, with the food program, Ed, is, you know, Craig still needs $109,000 from somebody by the effort to cover his expenses, along with all the other school stuff. So, I mean, it's, in the end, the amount is to run the food program shouldn't change, correct?
No, the bottom line is that whatever the deficit is won't change.
Yeah,
It's just
I
how
mean,
do you pay for that deficit?
who's responsible to pay for it? Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And Ed, I don't know if you know this or not. Have you seen from Craig, like, has the universal meal program, is he actually seeing an increase in income and participation because of it? Or
I just talked to him about that. It's not as dramatic as we saw last spring.
yeah,
We saw last spring it was significant. Now it's not as much, and I don't know why.
Well, it's such a weird year. I don't think you can call it one way or the other. Like, I don't even feel like eating that much, you know. I don't know. It's just a weird year.
I'm the other way around.
That's not, I was about to say that's not really true. Totally the opposite.
Well, I can tell you, just as someone who's in the building on the high school side every single day, one of the biggest drivers on the days that we see decreasing eating is the days that you provide them essentially like the cold lunch to go, sort of speak, on the remote weeks and things like that. That's a big driver of less participation. And the biggest bang in the building on the good days, the hot offerings are way more popular than anything else you'll ever see. So just as somebody who's sitting in the office watching kids eat every day, that's my overriding notion.
yeah. As soon as Craig doesn't have to package meals for every single meal, I think our quality will increase dramatically. And our costs should go down if he doesn't have to keep buying all the plastic crap.
Yeah, and my recycling will go down. So I don't, Ed, I don't know that you're able to run that number.
Well, I have to get the counts first, and I just texted Larry, and hopefully he can give me the 630 counts, and then I can come up with a percentage.
Okay. So so Scott, we're at the end of the list. So why don't you?
Thank you. Yeah, it's not a lot going on. I actually had a question about the food program. We've covered part of that. Another thing that was the high school estimate, and we covered that question. It really sounds like that Christine and David and Ed are really trying to really get that tight. So that's figured out. One thing that came up in the, we talked about the transportation movement of monies in the SU board meetings, and I think it was related quickly that all 3 districts pay the same for transportation, and that was sounded a little bit too easy to me, and so I wish that Ed could tell us a little more detail about that. And that's another one of these situations with equalized pupil, because there's a lot of Heartland and Wethersfield students that are not riding a local bus to school. And so, is Ed still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
So why would the 3 districts have?
Because you essentially all have the same amount of buses, and miles wise, Heartland's got the most miles to travel. So it's based on mileage. It's not based on students. So if you start consolidating and having less miles, then we could probably make it so that there's less, the cost would go down. I'll also say that because of COVID, cost of transportation has been adjusted. It gets adjusted on a monthly basis based on what we actually use. That's kind of the arrangement that we have with the transportation companies. And it has been less. One of the things that we were hoping for was that we would see even more of a significant savings, but the buses were used to distribute meals during when you went 100% remote. And that actually turned out to be even more miles because it wasn't bus stops, it was the end of driveways.
Yeah,
And that has nothing to do with equalized pupil. That has everything to do with the contract that we negotiated with the bus service. When we put the contract out to bid, we got one bid, and that was from Student Transportation of Vermont. Butler Bus decided not to bid. So there were only two companies that we had gotten bids from in the past, and the one that we got a bid from was Student Transportation of Vermont.
Geez. So it really comes down to miles is what you're saying, but I don't understand, but somehow it still seemed, you still came to three identical numbers for three districts.
Yeah. Because in Windsor, at Mount Scottney School District, it's not just Windsor. Windsor's mileage as a town isn't as much, but when you throw in Brownsville, then you're adding a lot more miles.
Well, that's
It makes sense to me because each of the towns is cut up into the exact same diamond. So it's just, well, not each of the towns. If you count Heartland and Windsor and West Windsor together as one diamond, all these diamonds are the exact same size throughout the entire state. So, okay. So going back to Ed, I'm going to let you crunch numbers for a while.
Okay.
If Larry gets back to you.
Hey, can I ask another question about the food program, please?
Okay.
Sorry, Nikki. So this includes a little bit of like personal frustration, but you know, we have talked a lot about wanting the food program someday, ultimately, to act like it's acting right now, because the USDA has made it the free and reduced program, has blanketed that over all students at school in Vermont. So nobody has to come to school with money for lunch. I wish that could be the way it is every day, regardless of a pandemic situation. But here we are, and we've got a budget that's making us uncomfortable, and it's hard to talk about that. I wish we knew how much, for instance, a year's worth of students bringing lunch money to school added up to. Like, what is that parent and caregiver contribution to the lunch program? What would it look like for the district to cover that?
It's actually really different than that, Scott, because there's different ways you can qualify and a different way the federal government would reimburse. So it's not necessarily just this town covering what families would be paying. There's different processes to apply for universal school meals. So they would be reimbursed separately. So most likely it would actually be less than that. If it's more than that, then that would be crazy making. But I think it most likely, if you did the work to qualify for universal meals, then you would actually pay less than what your families are contributing.
I'm glad to hear that. That sounds like still involves some work, and I'm not.
It involves an immense amount of work, and it's something I haven't been able to work on since our last meeting. But yeah, I mean, it it is a big process because there's a couple different ways to qualify, and I think we'd have to use community eligibility provision. And I don't know if it's one of these things where you have to collect a whole bunch of data for a set period of time, and then your reimbursement rate is set on that data. I'm not sure if we can even accomplish the collection of that data this year, just because of the way the situation is right now. Or if Craig even would say, "Ooh, I don't want to because our participation rate is so wacky because half our students are remote that we'd end up having to pay more." You know, like we might as well wait a year and get those participation rate numbers really high without trying to have a regular year when kids actually show up to school, and then get a reimbursement rate based on that. But I'm not sure. I mean, I just haven't had the time to put the legwork in to figure out what we could do, and what we would qualify for. I think we're in that middle position where we don't have enough, we don't demonstrate enough need to qualify for kind of the easy route for universal school meals, which is good in some ways, I guess.
You know, Beth, it's interesting you should say that, because when I spoke with Craig on Friday, and I don't know if you've been following it, but this whole CARES money and all of that it looks to me like, and Craig actually said this, not me. What Craig was saying was that he didn't think that anyone would ever pay for another meal again. He thinks that universal is going to be mandatory everywhere. And I would have to concur, because there's money being thrown at child nutrition. And with this new administration, I think you're going to see meals free at the schools forever. Well,
I think you're right, Ed. Yeah. I'm optimistic like that, but I will say to everybody on this phone call, go to Hunger Free Vermont's website, go to their Universal School Meals campaign, and sign a support letter, because they're pushing the state now to do that. If we're not going to pass it nationally, we as a Vermont, we are a leader in farm to school and school nutrition programming. So if anyone's going to do it first, we can. There's really way.
Isn't there also another initiative, because with farm to school or farm to farm or something that's happening?
Well, so there's another thing being put forth through the legislature for increased reimbursements around local foods. So like if you're buying local beef or local veggies or whatever, the school would be reimbursed for those veggies at a higher rate than they would if they just got them off the back of the Cisco truck. So that's the other thing that is a hope for next year. And that would be universal or not, because even if they're doing universal meals, that would still be a push to try to buy more locally sourced foods.
They've already this year, haven't they already this year extended the universal free lunches till the end of the year?
Yeah. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
So this year, no one's paying.
That's right.
And the reimbursement rate is set at the summer reimbursement rate. So that's why Beth was saying the summer reimbursement rate is significantly higher than the regular reimbursement rate. So with universal, so any kid can eat, you would think the numbers would go up, but maybe what Wendy said is true. Maybe it's the hot lunch, cold lunch issue.
Oh, there's 1.5 million issues around it too. I mean, it's really hard to crack the nut this year around school meals and who wants to participate and who doesn't. But I think, the other thing that I think we as a community can do better around is, these meals are free for anyone 18 and under. So anyone in the early childhood program should be getting those. So if you have a 2-year-old at home, you should be able to go get a lunch. So just trying to communicate that more to the community, that these meals are available every day. Yeah, it might involve the thing that's unfortunate is the drive to the school right now, so we don't have things being delivered. But, there's no reason. Ed, do you know if they're being delivered to the early childhood program, or David?
I know the answer, and it's yes. So
awesome.
Because I did the summer food program, and we had on daycare facilities. And so when we do a remote week like last week, we stop at some of the more known daycare centers and leave off 6, 8, 10 meals for those groups. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, as I can continue to try to carve out some time and see what universal meals just for Heartland, what we would need to do for the legwork, and maybe try to get a moment of Craig's time around it. But the other movement is just statewide. Just do whatever you can to spread the word and support that.
I appreciate all that, Beth. That's great to hear. I think that maybe my communicating ability here is not that great ever. And what I'm trying to say is that, you know, we're the elected school directors, and it's really not your responsibility, Beth, to do all that kind of stuff. And
no, it's my job, Scott. I wouldn't do this as a school director. I'm doing this as a Vital Communities Food and Farm Program Manager.
I understand you have a role in the region to help. And I'm not trying to be I'm trying not to disrespect your desire to do this. That is awesome. I think that what's being missed is that if we could, as a school board, commit to it, even if it looks like the federal government and or the state are going to cover it for the foreseeable future, then it would demand that our supervisory union central office, you know, kept up on this kind of stuff. And we're not seeing progress here, I guess is the best word for that. And it seems so clear. I think I'd say to all of us, it's not all of us board members, that the how clear the food program is to learning at school every day. It just seems like it's part of our mission statement. It's part of our vision. All we'd have to do is commit to that. I don't know how many thousands of dollars that number is that parents and caregivers are sending to school with children, not this year, but in the past.
I guess I'm trying to figure, so you want to find out what the paid lunches were in prior years?
Yeah, it's something to go on, Ed. I mean,
and what would you do with that number?
I mean, what other contribution is there to the food program besides, you know, what comes from property taxes? It's what parents and caregivers send to school.
There's adult sales, there's there's a la carte sales, there's snacks, there's.
No, I'm not suggesting that nobody has to that teachers don't have to bring cash in. I'm talking about the students.
Yeah, I think I'm super excited about the opportunity to be able to provide universal meals. I just don't feel like this is the year. I think what Beth is saying is that it's almost impossible to calculate what it would cost this year. We know it's not just the contribution from families. And I want to commit to it, but I can't. I mean, I'm imagining it's going to be several $100,000, and I can't imagine trying to fit that into our budget. So that's kind of what my take is right now. And I really, really hope that the federal government and the state government find a way to make this happen for all of us.
And also, this food item line is not going to go away, even with universal meals. So we will be contributing to meal, because what universal meals is going to be paying for, it's going to be reimbursed at those federal rates. So I forget what it is, Ed, you probably know, but it's something atrocious. It's like $3, you know, per lunch that we get reimbursed. That's all costs. So that's food, that's staffing, equipment, insurance, all of it. And so so if we want to continue to have the quality program we have, we will continue to need to invest in our program. Mm-hmm. So it won't, that line item is not going to go away because all of a sudden the feds are paying for lunch. So that's, you know, that's something to continue to remember. So that line item will stay. and then most likely have an additional on top of it to cover those free meals if you wanted to go universal. But yeah, I mean, and again, it's all timing. Like it's one of those things where right now it is, I don't feel like, like are we supposed to be voting on this budget tonight? Like that's, and I don't feel like I could, as a representative within my work, to say or encourage people to sit behind universal school meals when I cannot give any sort of estimate of what that would cost a community. That I would feel much more comfortable if I could give some sort of estimate to say, this is what it will cost you. Should we invest in this or not? We're not sure. This is a really round, wiggly number, but at least we have some idea. And right now, I don't know if it's 500,000. I don't know if it's 600,000 or 200. And that seems really, like that doesn't sit well with me personally to try to work.
There's no way you could not make that decision tonight. And in addition, I think if that decision were to be made, and I know sometimes I sound like a broken record, but I think that really should be at the supervisory union level. I mean, we can't feed kids in one building and not feed kids in another building. So I think what Ed and I and Craig could do is we could start, as Scott suggested, we could start to get, we could look back at prior years. And
I can tell you right now, like in FY20, which is last year, through March, it was $100,441.61.
Was that across the SU?
Across the SU.
Okay. So that
there was 18,000. There was like 24,000 or 23,000 sales to adults.
But that was also, there's no Windsor there.
No, there is. They're all there. I added them all together just so I could make a comparison.
But that's under cafe services still.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's all we've got for prior year. Yeah. I mean, I think Ed, you and I can, we can keep looking at that a bit. But yeah, that sounds right. I mean, so what you're saying, Ed, and in that 100,000, that included adult meals, Ed?
No, there was another 24,000 in adult meals.
Okay. So it's about 100,000, and that went up until March?
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So
what Scott's suggesting is that we take that 100,000 and we build that into the budget, so that the SU as a whole can provide universal meals, whether or not the feds do.
Yeah, I think that's the.
But that's still a wicked squishy number, because that's going off of the participation rates of that at that time. So all of a sudden, if you have a 99% participation rate, then your cost is going to be significantly different.
Yeah. I mean, but all you
have all the staffing costs of Windsor in there as well that you didn't have that year.
Well, it's just what we're trying to figure out. I think what Scott's asking for is, what did students' parents give to the program? And that's essentially the number. The problem is as you point out, when you start looking at whether they would have put more in if the food quality was better, all of those questions are hard to answer. And in addition to that, if you look at what David's saying, that we could look at those numbers, it'd be difficult even now to look at those numbers, because in FY21, we still don't have a real clear picture of what a food program would look like when kids are going to school every day, all day, and they're getting, as Wendy pointed out, hot food, and they have choices, and they're going to the cafeteria. They're not going to the cooler at the end of their driveway. Those are the kind of things that it's going to take a while to get a number. Unfortunately, we're not going to have a number for students for how much parents are giving kids, because right now we have universal food. So kids aren't paying anything. So until we have a program, it's going to be difficult to come up with a number that we could add to the food service program, so that you would provide it whether or not the federal government went with universal for everybody.
Yeah. All you've got is the historical data that Ed just shared. And you're right, that's not terribly accurate. But what I will say is that if we decide to do something, we decide to do it supervisory union wide, we're not under the gun of having to prepare a budget like you have to prepare tonight and approve tonight if it's going to go out in the town report and all of that stuff. I mean, we could at any point as an SU board decide that that was a priority for us. Maybe we hear inadvertently that the state's not going to do it anymore. The federal government's not going to do it anymore. I think then we have a rich discussion about whether we want to do it. And we can do that at the supervisory union level through assessments if we want to do that. But we certainly don't have to make that decision tonight.
Well, they did ask me if I could put together some numbers. I did ask Larry for numbers for the end of the school year. He was having trouble putting those together. He wanted to verify them, but he said, I can give you exactly what is in Power School today for each school.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, well, give me those numbers. And when he gave me those numbers, Heartland's was 256, Mount Scottney's including West Windsor was 589, and Weathersfield's was 217. So when I take a look at those and I say, all right, let's assess, the food program had a shortfall of 339,134, which in your budget, I broke out by equalized pupil. But when I use these numbers and the percentages they generate, Heartland's percentage goes from 32.03 based on equalized pupil to 24.11 based on enrolled students. All right. And the enrollment goes, or the number of the assessment goes from 108,609 to 81,750, which is a decrease of $26,859. Windsor's goes up by 34,555, and Weathersfield's goes down by $7,695.
And that's the food service deficit. Is that what you're saying, Ed?
No, David, you missed the conversation where the way that food service is allocated in the budget right now is based on equalized pupil, but
Correct.
We were kind of like, for Heartland and Weathersfield, that's including a third of our students that have absolutely no access to food. And so it just felt like that. I agree with equalized pupil everywhere else, but in this particular situation, it just doesn't, and we talked about this before, it just doesn't seem that.
Yeah.
I need a drink.
That's in this year's budget, though, not next year's budget. That's this year.
It's in both, David.
Oh, well, it's in both, yeah. But I'm saying the accuracy, I mean, we can't project next year, but I get what you're saying. I understand.
We had talked about changing it previously, but I just don't think I think it got lost in the shuffle.
Clarifying question is the FY22 budget the first year that the food service will this is the first year that Scottney district has seen participation in the food program, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So really, I mean, last year, even though it was at the SU, it was 2 K through 8s divvying up what there was to divvy up, and so all we had to do was split it by students. Correct. Or even if we split it by equalized pupil, it would be pretty darn near similar because there were 2 K through 8 school districts. So now with the addition of, really the bugaboo here is the addition of the Scottney district, which is a totally different machine.
Yeah. But I think that it sounds to me like there's certainly, remember, the reason why, we can even talk about this is that, and I'm sure Ed explained this, the food service is a separate fund. It's not in that assessment that goes along with that other fund. So we can assess that any way the SU board decides to assess it. And if it seems to make more sense or it seems more fair to do it by pupil, then, because you've got a third of your population that's not eating, they're eating in another school. I mean, I think you can argue that, much more clearly than you could argue the other general fund assessment. But yeah, I mean, I think that's an SU conversation, and we can have it and we can do it. Are you saying that it's hard to know? You're trying to wrestle with it because of the amount that's in your budget right now? Yeah.
Proposed budget for 22.
For 22, right? Yeah. Next year's budget.
Yeah. And so it decreases the tax rate by 1 point.
1 penny?
Yeah.
Roughly.
Yeah. And so here's the challenge that I'm struggling with is, I just feel like that's another high school student. Like, so we could decrease the tax rate by 1 penny and then carry a deficit because we add an extra high school student into some other year. I don't know.
Ed, what did you say Mount Scottney goes up by how much? Did he say 34,000?
34,555.
Okay, and Weathersfield goes up or down?
Down.
Down 7,695.
Yeah, I think the logic is pretty plain and simple, and I think that it's I don't think, knowing Mount Scottney the way that I know Mount Scottney, they would accept that logic, and they're certainly right now. I don't want to speak completely for them, but both, and maybe this has changed, Ed, but last time I looked at it, their taxes were going down in both.
David, it's changed. David, it's changed.
It's changed. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I did not know that.
Yeah.
It would only be fair if you were going to look at this a different way to also understand that some of those West Windsor kids are still out of high school now because they haven't completely gone through that period of time. So that would it might change Larry's numbers a little bit.
Yeah.
Get complicated.
So it's an SU discussion that we're having in a Heartland meeting. So I guess what we need to decide is how much money are we going to put in that transfer to food program line? And I'm throwing that back at the board.
What's in there now?
And so right now we have 108,609, 108,000. So after having gone through this entire discussion, I would still like the SU to revisit how the food transfer program is allocated.
Yeah.
But at this point in our budgeting, I'm tempted to leave it as what is in there.
It's always good news when the taxes go down after you set the budget.
What was that number of the decreasing number for Heartland, Nikki?
It decreases by 26,850, and that equals approximately a penny on the tax rate.
Yeah, I would just keep it only because if it doesn't come out the other end, the SU doesn't agree, then you wouldn't want to short the program.
I agree.
Well, the program would not be shorted. It would be a matter of when we collected the money from via taxes and how easy the financing was, but no program is going to be shorted.
Yeah, but going over a budget is never a thing that's aspired for. So we can avoid that.
You know,
we do every year thanks to our new tuition students.
But it would be interesting is that I guess you could revisit it at the SU, set it the way it is right now, because again, this is the budget. I mean, there have been years, as you can see, when you look at that, I don't know whether you guys can see this because you don't have the detail in front of you. That came the last time. But if you look at the detail, just let me get there real quick.
Okay, well, I'll add in now. I think I agree with Nikki because otherwise we would arrive at that SU meeting with having made a decision here and expect with expectations of the rest of the districts, and it needs to be a more of a something we all engage in together.
So in FY20, we budgeted for your budget for the food program was 72,527, and you paid 34,026, and that was due again to going to the summer food program starting in March. Okay, so your reimbursement rate jumped significantly from March till June. So you saw that lowered the cost of your food, or it made the increase the revenue that you got from reimbursements. It decreased the overall cost. My point in bringing that up is that all of these are estimates. So this year we budgeted 111,448. We budgeted that based on the reimbursements from a regular year. You know what I mean? When we did the budget for 21, we were it was pre-COVID, right? So we could very well see that you won't spend 111,000 this year, right? And then in 22, when you budget 108, you could go to a board meeting and say, you know, when we do start assessing this back, we want to do it based on this pupil count, you know, rather than the way we're doing it by equalized pupil. You could change the formula because we haven't billed anybody yet. It's really all about how you put it in the budget right now. And the cost of that is what Nikki just outlined. Putting it in the way I have it right now, it's costing you $1.1 cent.
I want to keep the terminology making sense to me because I'm still stuck on the fact that this is the first year that FY22 is the first year that a Scutney district will be part of an SU-wide food program. And so
no, they're part of it this year in 21.
FY21 this year.
21. They're currently part of our food program.
Oh, I thought I just asked that question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they're in it now.
Okay, I got that wrong then. I don't have a point to make other than there was a period of time that it was Wethersfield and Heartland, and how was it divvied up then? Would be the best question, I guess.
I think if I can remember correctly, we just said 50-50.
Yeah, correct.
Just to get the program going.
Yeah, no,
that
I
was the
agree
agreement.
with that.
And then the problem and why we're talking tonight is because we never revisited that agreement. I mean, so we've just got to have that conversation at some point in terms of your budget. I mean, you've got to go with what you're comfortable with for a number, but then we've got to get those 3 districts together or the SU together and make a decision how we're going to divide that out.
I don't know that this is necessarily needs to related or sort of related, but just an added piece that for the summer lunch program, because the food was housed under the umbrella of Windsor, that meant that Heartland and Wethersfield came along with that and became 100% open. So originally Heartland and Wethersfield would have only been able to collect revenues and be reimbursed for meals served to free and reduced students, but because they fall under the open umbrella under Windsor, then everybody comes along and becomes 100% open for all sites. So that probably also helped along the way.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, so I want to get moving on. So I think Scott and I both said that we're good with carrying this number. I think Beth kind of said that too, if I can remember. Okay. Colleen and Sarah, are you, Colleen?
I do
Sarah?
too. I think this is something to work on for the next budget.
Okay. Great. So we've gone through the minute details of the budget. I think that we're all pretty familiar with where we are. They're really, like, Christine's made dramatic reductions in the textbooks supplies category, but that makes such a minor dent in the budget. The biggest dent in the budget is the way that we program. Well, the biggest dent in the budget is our tuition. And then the second biggest, which we have no control over, our tuition. And so the thing that we have control over, as usual, is the K-8 program. And I think as a board, and I'm mainly putting words to thoughts that I think we all have, but correct me if I'm wrong. As a board, I think we've very much said that we are not going to change the program at the K-8 level just because our high school tuition numbers changed. And that to me seems fair, and that seems like we need to be right sizing the education for our K-8 students, regardless of what happens with our tuition students. And so I guess I mainly want agreement from the board members that is how we're thinking. I see Colleen nodding. Sarah probably doesn't like the way I phrased it.
No. I mean, I think, absolutely agree in principle. But I do think it's useful to, to pull some things out, if for no other reason than how we communicate to our town. I think, for example, I think it's really important that we remind the town that $40,000 of the increase is our police coverage for the school, right? That's we have to keep, we've got to remind our taxpayers of that. We've got to remind our taxpayers that we don't have any control over the health insurance increases, and we can tell them exactly what that is. So I absolutely agree in principle, but I think it's important to be able to pull some things out to talk about.
So I brought this up as a segue because I know that Christine's presented at a bunch of the last meetings where we are programmatically, and I mainly because I'm hoping that we vote on this in the near future, like in a few minutes. I wanted Christine to weigh in on what changing the program would look like and how that would help or hurt our population. And I want to look at it from both. I mean, I don't think any of us are looking to increase the budget this year, but I want to know what programmatic changes that she would make in either direction, just so that we have full transparency on what those impacts would look like to our budget. Go, Christine.
Sure. I'll start with what I would love to add, if you don't mind, and then we'll move to other that might be taken out or would impact negatively. As you know, I about what education like. I mean, it's limited us in some ways, but I'm sorry if my internet is wonky. Let me know if you can. So, in looking at what we've done this year, I would definitely want to take away some of the positive aspects of what we've learned, and we are moving towards a more interdisciplinary co-teaching model. So I would, in the dream world, make that happen more in school, which would require more additional related arts time, especially around the part-time music teacher. I know our teachers advocate for more intervention for our kiddos. And we have last year, we pulled 6th grade out of the 6, 7, 8 middle school and created a 5, 6 middle level with some very creative youth staff to make that happen. But having a dedicated an additional person on that 516 would benefit the kids. So those are kind of the things that I would love to add, but know that it's not the time. In terms of reducing the budget, it's staffing. So I don't know if you need specifics, but it would be support staff or regular education teachers, or it would be staff, and it would have a huge impact on the program at Harvard Elementary School, and it would negatively impact our kids. So I don't know if you need more detail. I certainly don't want to go in that direction, but if the board directs me to do that, then that's what I'll do.
Well, then you and I, in a budget meeting, we're looking at our current staffing level and how that relates to the equalized pupil numbers. And for most grades, we're right in there, if I'm remembering correctly.
We're in the we are falling under EQS guidelines of class sizes.
Yeah. Oh, whoops. Mute myself as I go to talk. And we're not like exceeding EQS standards by a dramatic amount.
We are not. We are not. There are minor places in the budget. It says EQS standards are a full-time library media specialist for every 300 kids. I mean, our population numbers, we're typically around 280, or we have been. I don't know going if that'll be what we get back from the students we've lost to home study and parents that have chosen private schools this year because the schedule it fit their scheduling needs, or kids that are that will move into our district. So it's fluid. I would hate to even estimate what our numbers will be next year, but I anticipate they'll be in that ballpark. So there's a little bit of play there, but not enough to decrease a position, in my professional opinion.
Yeah, I think so. Based on what I was looking at with those same numbers. Okay. So does anybody else have any further questions on the budget? With no further questions, does anybody want to make a motion?
So the motion just has to include that bottom line, right?
Okay. Colleen.
I move that we adopt the budget of $9,028,704 for Heartland. How's that?
Yeah.
Does that work?
For the 21-22 school year.
Okay, for the 21-22 school year.
And Ed, does that include carrying that budget? Do we have to add that to that, or that's not that budget, that deficit? Is that automatically added in?
Oh, Ed, that's already in there, right?
I believe it's in there. Ed should.
Yeah, it's just accrual. You don't have to put that in the motion.
Yeah, that's all in the calculation.
Great.
It's accrual.
Yep.
Yeah, when David wasn't here, I was asking about a tentative executive session, and is it?
Yeah, I put it in the chat, Scott. It was.
Yeah, we can do it.
Yeah.
But I mean, if we approve a budget, then it's.
Oh, I see.
We're not talking.
Okay.
We're not talking about like the nitty-gritty.
Yep. Okay. So we can hold off on that motion until after our executive session.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm asking about the mechanics of that. I mean, I don't know. It's at the end of the last meeting, I was, I think it's fair to say that Christine and Ed and David have done a lot here because the number was a little bit higher, or I'm not sure how much higher it was. But then at the last meeting, I asked about that, and Christine said that they didn't feel comfortable with that, and they had essentially held the programs at status quo. I don't know if that's just the same as saying level. And it's a little bit, Sarah brought it up. I mean, it's a lot of stuff out of our hands, and such as wage and benefit increases, not necessarily all of the wage increases out of our hands. This is kind of a question that's very hard to answer. I mean, but at what point how long can you just keep going on with those kind of beliefs that you can't change your programs if all the individual pieces get more expensive all the time? So
I think it's a good question, Scott.
I think it's a good question.
I do too.
So we can talk further. Let's table this until later in the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to impact whether you vote now or vote later, but because the other thing I think too that we're going to have to watch is there's going to be a lot of conversations, at the state level around the funding formula. It's been a hot topic over the last couple of legislative sessions. I think it's getting hotter because this year is going to press it, full court, because we're not the only ones. I mean, I'm talking to all the superintendents in the Southeast, and they're all, not all, but most of them are facing very limited expenditure increases and very high tax increases. So it is the way it is. And I don't know if we wiped out that tuition line and we also held harmless on the salary and benefits. I mean, I don't know. Even if you pull the tuition line out, didn't we say that the increase K-8 is, or the budget increase is, within single digits, right? I mean, it's not like you've got a 15% increase in your expenditure budget.
No, she decreased a ton of stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's really, and so I think at the state level, they've just got to follow this pattern and look at what's happening across the board. And I know their answer has always been less staff because we've got less kids, but I think there are enough people in Montpelier. It's more complicated than that. That's part of it, but it's not all of it. But I think you could go ahead and vote. I mean, I don't think an executive session is going to make a difference in that bottom line. But it's up to you. If you want to wait, we can wait.
So I did just run the numbers. Our K-8 budget is up 3%.
Yeah. And does that include yeah, okay. So that excludes the tuition.
It's everything but tuition.
Right.
That's almost entirely the wage increase though, right?
Oh, I was going to say, if you've got a 10%.
We're not adding programs. We're not.
Right.
It's the wage increase plus the
wage
increase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's
I think
is the wage increase, and then the other
health insurance,
wage increase.
Yeah, there's nothing new in this budget.
There's nothing new. I'm comfortable saying to our taxpayers, this wage increase was the best, it was the best we could do, and we don't have a choice. We didn't think it was the year to take this to the mat. We don't, we have no control over health insurance. We can talk about the policing issue, but we have, that's because our town does not have coverage. So there, I think all these things that we can say to our taxpayers that, I feel very comfortable making that explanation.
Do you feel comfortable increasing the bottom line and making the explanation?
I'm sorry, what do you mean
That-
increasing the bottom line?
Well, I mean, are we talking about changing the budget at all? Are we talking about whether we're comfortable with it as it is?
I mean, I think that's what we're talking about, but maybe it is worthwhile to go into an executive session to talk a little bit, so people feel comfortable.
I will say,
Sure.
in public session that Christine went through, because I asked her to, when we had our first budget meeting between the chair and principal, we went through the state's education standards, the EQS standards, and looked at the classroom breakdown in what Christine is proposing in this budget, and how that works with the education standards. And based on those numbers, I don't feel comfortable. Like the number of people that we have in the building is right for what she proposed for how to educate the kids. And so unless you want to get into stuff like having a lot of different kids of different grades in the same room, which I think is really difficult on our teachers and our kids, I didn't see any dramatic places to change things.
I wouldn't expect there to be any. I was wondering if we were trying to increase the budget in some way. We dance. I mean, I don't know.
And I guess I feel like,
Or do we have to deal with, getting over this hurdle of the wages changes, which I would think we kind of might need to do, and COVID, and hope we can increase things next year. That's kind of where I sit right now, but I can always be convinced to spend more money.
Colleen, I feel similar.
Is it okay for me to say that out loud?
I feel similar to you, Colleen, in that, I would be, because I don't feel like right now I have a clear understanding, because all I've heard is that Christine has cut the budget as best she could and as minimal as she could.
I mean, it looks trimmed as tightly as it could possibly be trimmed, as far as I can tell.
But then part of me says, what was trimmed? I don't know what we're losing. And if we're talking about, $20,000 here, $20,000 there, and we're a penny increase in taxes, then yeah, we spend more money, like that's, so maybe I would feel better if I understood what those cuts were, what are the sacrifices we're making to keep this budget as level as possible.
All right, and are we over sacrificing?
I just don't know. I don't have that information.
One thing I can say is when you do look at supplies, because you have pulled that out and said it's just cut by 35,000, but if you go in and you look at what we spent, we budgeted for in FY20, 97,720, and in FY20 you spent 51,587, and then the year prior to that it was essentially the same. So I think what you're doing is you're budgeting it more realistically. It's not necessarily cutting it, but you're looking at a lot of what Christine's done is look back at prior year and said, well, given now that I've got 2 years or 3 years of priors, maybe we are over budgeted. Maybe we don't need as much. So not all of it is a cut per se. It's more of a recognition that it was over budgeted to start with.
And I would agree with that. There have been no positions cut, Beth, to answer your question, just where we have some control, and that is, mainly supplies and some professional development, contracted services that we were hopeful to, partner with. But with our new system, eFinance, it's easier for me to do this work, and Ed's been really helpful. Supply line. So I don't think staff will suffer in any way, or kids will suffer in any way from that reduction. It just more accurately reflects what we spend. Yeah. Need.
Christine, you might kill your video so that we can hear you.
She needs
Yeah,
to
poor
buy more
Christina.
mice for the wheel.
That's weird. I'm back. Sorry. I would go use another computer, but I'm recording, so I think I'm gonna it would end the recording if I logged off.
I think if
so
you turn off your
Maybe somebody
video,
else should record.
I'll turn off my
if you
video.
turn off your video, there. Now we'll be able to.
I don't know where I got cut off. Going over budget.
You're still cutting out.
To be honest with you.
Yeah, Christine, you still cut out a little bit, but you usually have pretty good internet.
I know. I don't know what's going on. So I don't know where I cut out.
That's better.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. I'm not sure what I should repeat. I was just saying the reductions in here make sense, and I don't feel that it's the year to add any positions. I just don't think it's the right time.
Okay.
Would I like to? If you feel differently, you better than I. I don't know. I watch the news every day and I see a lot of people suffering. So it weighs on me.
Right. Me too. I was the one that brought up the executive session, and I didn't mean to throw it in the middle of the motion there, but that's actually what I did. And but I think that we have talked about, what am I trying to say? A lot of times I come down to like board members doing what board members do, and educators doing what educators do. And I think that I've heard from Christine, David, and Ed tonight how much of an estimate this fiscal year 22 budget is, and how they are willing to embrace that. And so, and it sounds like it's not going to move in executive session. So, it could go either way. And I think as a board member, I'm okay voting for the number on the bottom of that proposed FY22 budget, the number that Colleen gave in the motion, because I trust that Christine, David, and Ed would adjust that either way if they needed to. That's what I'll say.
So is there a second? I'm going to ask that.
Yeah. So Scott, do you want to be the second?
Yeah, I'll second it. Okay, there you go. There you go. Yeah.
Okay. So any further discussion on that motion? We've had a lot of discussion. Not that I'm trying to cut it off. Discussion is good. Okay. So we could, we have an option here. We've had a lot of discussion. We've had a motion in a second. We could continue with our meeting, go into executive session, and then just come out to vote. Or we could vote right now. What do you guys want to do?
I'm ready to vote.
I'll vote.
Okay, so that's all of us. So let me get the number up. Okay. So all those in favor of approving a budget for the 22-23 year, is that correct?
21, 22.
21, yep.
I always forget where we're going. Okay, 21-22 year of $9,028,704. Please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, we have approved the 21-22 budget. And it's scary, and I'm going to need all of your help explaining it. But I'm hopeful. David's comments that the legislature might need to look harder give me some hope. This just seems insane to me that we're not doing anything and seeing this type of increase.
Yeah.
And I know it's tuition and some of it is move-ins, but it just irks me.
So Nikki, I want to just, one of the things I wanted to speak about is that there are monies that are coming out of this, the pandemic, and there's CARES money. And what's going to happen is we're able to replace some of the dollars we would have spent in FY21, the year we're in, with monies from the grants, right? So hopefully, and I'm not going to promise anything because you guys have a lot of work here. You've got extra kids coming in for tuition, but the thought at the state level in my mind is that by doing that, you're going to build up a surplus in 21 that you'll be able to apply in 23, right? Because we're using the deficit from 2 years ago in this budget. You know what I mean? We don't know what 21 is. We know what 20 is. So we know the 20 year-end budget is a deficit. So that goes into 22. So as you can see, there's a moving target. But what I will say is that the way the state could help is they could make it so that some of these grants they could take them and just allocate them back to the schools as a local revenue. So what happens when you have a local revenue is that gets deducted directly from what your expenditure budget is. So say the state gave Heartland $300,000 in for FY22. You could take that $300,000 right off the top of this $9 million of the budget you just approved. And that would go into the formula. You know what I mean? So that would drive the cost of your budget down. But that's how they're allocating these funds is kind of crazy. It's all done on an application basis, and they're really fuzzy about what costs are eligible, and that it's really difficult. It's not helping us in FY22. That's my point. So you guys have access to somebody who's in the legislature. She's one of your colleagues, and that's Elizabeth Burrows. So she called me today and said, she's in the legislative session. She asked me, what do I think? And are there any things that I could think of that might, so everything you've talked about tonight, she probably could bring to the attention, at least bring to the attention to the legislature, because you guys are really struggling with something. And I don't think the legislature actually sees that. They're kind of removed from the actual nuts and bolts. And that's what you guys are doing. So I would encourage you to talk to her and say, hey, look, this is what we're struggling with, because they're going to struggle with it. Weathersfield's going to struggle with it. And allocating this money that they're going to give from Washington is going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money too.
Yeah.
Statewide.
Yeah. And
up to 100 million.
Pretty frequently.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. If everybody is good with it, I think we can move on to the rest of the agenda.
It's just say that it's not fair to put that weight on Elizabeth's shoulders. That when she's at a meeting, I mean, when she's at a school board meeting, she's a community member just like us.
Yeah.
No, she just asked me to ask you.
Yeah. No, she wants to be a conduit for us, which is good. Might as well take some advantage of it without abusing it. She's going to advocate, and she knows because she's trying to keep a very small school open in West Windsor. So she gets it.
Yeah, she asks for input all the time. I think right now she's new and incredibly energetic and looking for a lot of input. She may at some point be overwhelmed, but right now she's been really vocal about like, let her know what we need and what, and it's not that we expect that she can get things done all by herself. She's just one person. But just to get that conversation going. Okay, so my family just got home, so I'm slightly distracted. Okay, thank you, buddy. And we got dinner delivery. Okay, so moving on. Let's go to Christine's principal report, and we'll see. Maybe since we all got it, maybe somebody else could present it, and then maybe Christine's internet won't be as much of an issue.
Yeah, Angie, you have it. Can you present it? Thank you, Angie.
Okay, Angie's on for
Sure. Let me find it and put it up there.
I shared it. It's pretty short tonight, so don't panic. We the last time we met was the Monday of the holiday break week, and we had a remote week, so there's not too much to report on. But
So you got stuff from Tuesday and today.
yeah. Well, I took
Awesome.
pictures last week in meets that I made it to. So Angie's gonna pull it out. Thanks, Angie.
You're welcome. Just let me know and I'll push it through the.
All right. So I'll start with the updates. Of course, now I have to read Angie's tiny screen. Hold on. On my own.
I'll put it in present mode too.
Okay, that could help. All right. So I just wanted to really start by thanking the teachers in our school and our SU. As you all watched some pretty horrific things happen at our nation's capital last week, we were all glued to the TV, and in conversations among the administration and teachers emailing, like, what do we do? Do we open up this conversation? It's challenging, and so we did give the teachers permission to put aside the curriculum on Thursday. David sent an email and just gave them some good advice around just listen. If kids need to talk and process and ask questions about what they saw, please let them do that. I popped into a couple of those meets at the middle level, and I think the teachers handled it really well. I think some of them were extremely nervous about it. It's pretty politically charged environment that we're living in, and so they were careful, and I just wanted to publicly thank them for the work that they did on Thursday and continue to do. You would be maybe some of you heard that we have some pretty worried kiddos in our school, just seeing what's happening. So we will try to continue to mitigate their stress and talk through those situations. I will say David and I were brain processing after the fact, and I did see teachers giving some really good instruction, using it as a really good learning opportunity around checking your sources and looking at multiple perspectives and making up your own decisions. And so anyway, shout out to the teachers on the work on that. Again, second remote week, the attendance was really good. We did not have that many students that were marked absent, a handful a day. So we were pretty excited about that. Craig has approached me about wanting to do a community dinner, and we will do anything that creates a little normalcy this year. And so we've gone back and forth. We've decided it really needs to be grab and go. He was hopeful that people could come in and pick up, but we're going to refrain from that right now. We're just going to do a grab and go dinner on the January 28th. So there'll be more promotion on that event, but we're excited to do that for the community. And it's the whole community. Craig likes to feed anybody that wants to come. So it's not just limited to school families.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
Do you know if he needs any help? Like, is he looking for community help at all in preparation? Is that even allowed?
I mean, it's not. I will ask him, and I'll ask David if one or two people could help if he needs it. He does have now that we're centralized, he has staff he can call in from within the SU. I believe that's an accurate statement. David, correct me if I'm wrong, to help him, but
That's
I'll
great.
be updated on that.
Yes, you're right. Yep.
Just you probably heard character trait this month is put first things first. So we're really focusing on doing what we're supposed to first. So you may hear your kids talking about that at home. And I just got word from Jamie Bernstein, Miss Bernstein, that the cast and crew for, I'm not going to say this right, the Brothers Grimm I can't see it. There's something on there.
Spectacular.
Spectacular fun.
Spectacular.
Spectacular.
It's been announced. It's going to be remote. I think I was trying to count the number of students, and I believe we have about around 20 in. She has to limit it to 7th and 8th grade. So we're excited about that as well, and the kids are as well. So unless there are questions, Angie, you can hop to the next slide.
I was just going to say that Brittany and Christine, I think I emailed you guys, but I really appreciate the information about the character trait of the month that you've been putting in the newsletter. It's just really nice to know what's going on in school and to be able to
and reinforce.
Home.
Oh, good. Glad. So I know you had questions about the SRO, so I added a slide, and I'm glad David's here. I think we're both up to date on the information that, there may have been some information in the newspaper, but we've been meeting prior to the chief's resignation. We've been meeting as an SU staff, Mount Escutney administration, David, myself, Paul, our SRO, just defining the job, what the role, what his role, what the SRO's role is in the schools, and kind of mapping out a schedule of when it's most useful for him to be at different buildings. So we were working on that, and David was revising the MOU for the memorandum of understanding, and then we got word that the chief Sampson is leaving. David has been in conversation, I think he shared with you, with the town manager, and we did actually, Paul came in today. He's like, I'm still your SRO, I'm still your SRO. So I don't have worries about it, but want to entertain questions. And David, if you have more to add, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, no, I think you covered it. And I think I did send out the addendum that we've been working on in terms of duties. I think I sent that to, I know I sent it to Nikki. I don't know if I sent it to the other board members or not, but I can send it again if people want to see it. We wanted to get very specific around what are the, not just for Heartland, but also for Mount Escutney, what are the duties specific to the SRO? Because in this COVID condition, it was starting to get a little loose, but I think we've tightened it up, and I think that addendum will be great, and it'll be an addendum to the new MOU, which we realized I don't know that we ever signed a new MOU for this year. So Tom's putting one together that we'll sign, and we're going to have it go from January, right? Because we're in January now, through June of 22. So it'll go a year and a half. So I'm assuming that with the budget passed tonight, you want to keep moving forward with the SRO. Paul does a great job, and he wants to, that's one of the reasons he doesn't want to be chief. He likes what he's doing now.
And he's really fantastic at it. He happened to be at school today, and we had a situation where we needed him. So it was nothing hugely significant, but we needed him, and he was there, which was wonderful. So any questions about that?
I think I guess when I saw the news in the Valley News, the two things that jumped to my mind were, just with a shift in leadership, and it sounds like there may not be a personnel shift for our schools, but if that were to happen, just wanting to make sure that we really keep, those discussions that we had when we decided to go with the SRO kind of really front and center, and that the MOU is specific to those discussions that we had, and that it still is very clear to everyone involved. If those may be new people coming in, but that it's very clear to everyone involved that that we made these decisions around limiting certain aspects of the job and having a committee to decide, before there was certain activities, and just to make sure that that's all right there, and that everybody knows that as personnel changes. And then I think the other, unfortunately, the other thing that jumped to my mind was you know, are we, with this shift, do we feel confident about just with everything going on in the world, just, you know, just about security, and are we asking the right questions? And I know that we probably are, but I felt that I wanted to just check in about that. I just got word that my niece and nephew who go to Union Elementary in Montpelier won't be going to school on January 20th because of, they're doing a remote day because of the threats to state capitals. There are real security concerns about what's going to happen that day and where protest and armed protest may occur. And so, so I think that sort of covers it. I just, it's almost two sides of one coin. I want to make sure that we're, really continuing to kind of be very mindful about the presence of law enforcement in our schools. And at the same time, I want to make sure that we've got a good plan.
Yeah, that makes sense, Sarah. I can say that the addendum that David has really reflects what we came up with as a committee. I think maybe there might be some additional items that we didn't think about when we crafted the first agreement. And I think specifically, he's a member of our safety, and I don't know that we put that in the beginning contract. He, when we went to using the Alice protocol, all helped us practice, scenarios. So we're using him in that way. He would come to staff meetings and run those drills with us. And we also, and I can't remember if we put this in the first one, he does do well child checks for us when we have, truancy concerns or well child concerns. He'll do that for us. Those are the two that come to mind. I don't think there are any other significant changes, but David, I'll defer to you if you, does anything pop out?
No, I was just looking at it. No, I think that's it. I think you've got it.
In terms of a plan for the 20th, we have not talked about that yet, but Angie, if you want to, while you're here, add that to our admin agenda for Wednesday, that might be something we need to talk about. Oh, it is something we need to talk about.
Yeah. And I think as Sarah said, it might be a little different in Montpelier than it will be in Heartland, but it's worth a conversation.
Yep, for sure.
Hey, I had a question quickly that Sarah touched on this earlier, and this is our major budget meeting of the year. So David, could you share with us as much as you can how the finances work in the school for the Ascutney School District and their relationship with, because part of their district is Windsor Town. So we see this in our school budget only, but their police department is part of their town. So how does that work for them, for that school district?
Yeah, so the part that they don't have to think about is, I don't know how to explain this, but it's sort of the 911 part. I mean, they've got their local PD access 24/7. So, that's folded right in. I think what we had to make sure of in Heartland is that the building, and just the building, because the Heartland town hasn't invested in this, as we all know. So just the building and the school grounds are covered 24/7. So if you have a broken pane of glass or a burglary or a B&E, the Windsor Police Department is going to respond to that and help us and our insurance company work through it. But that does not have to be the case in Mount Ascutney with Windsor and West Windsor. So that's the only difference, really.
So does the Mount Ascutney have a line in their budget or somewhere in their budget that covers their school resource officer, but you're suggesting that
yes,
it's much smaller than ours because they have their emergency covered by the town?
Yeah, well, it's not that much smaller than yours. I think it's probably almost about the same, but they're also covering a wider, they've got two buildings over there and more kids, right? But no, they have a line item in their budget to cover the SRO. You're covering about a third, they're covering about probably about a half, and then the balance, is goes to the town. Because whoever the SRO is, and Paul, let's just say Paul still has to respond to a call in town if there's no other policeman available. So the town still keeps a very small percentage of his salary. And then I think you're about a 1/3, close to 2/3 split with Mount Scottney.
Thank you.
Luckily, they're happy with his services too, so it all works out.
Are we good to go to the next slide?
Yep.
All right. So I just wanted to update you on numbers of kids returning on the 25th. We're up to 16 in Heartland. Angie and I have had, seems like a lot lately, meetings with parents, remote and in person, to help them make the best decision for their families. So this could change.
But I appear to be missing one. I have 15. So I am sending you and Linda a email to get I thought you said 16, but I have 15 on my list. So we'll make sure we have the right numbers.
It may include the home study, Angie.
Oh, okay.
I think it does actually. So.
Okay. That explains it.
So we're working on, rooms. Our rooms do have capacity, and we're looking forward to kids coming back. So the last slide is the COVID update slide, and as I think I shared before the break, we had surveillance testing during remote learning. We had 42 staff participate. This time we had a couple come back inconclusive, which I've learned means not enough sample, or according to Annette, who spoke to VDH today, you're at the beginning or end of COVID. So staff are retesting. Those staff that are inconclusive are retesting, but that was the only thing that came up at Heartland this time, which is great. You did, I'm sure, read.
Are those staff quarantining right now? Like, are they, what?
They don't recommend that they quarantine. Actually, one is waiting until the second test results come back to school, just because that person felt that was the right thing to do. And one is not, for whatever reason. I think hadn't gone anywhere, so wasn't anxious about it. So David sent an email about the extended day. We met for several hours and finalized our plan to extend the day last week with the union, and David sent that out to parents and staff. So we are now in planning mode to make that shift. It is, one of the things that we ensured staff that they would have is a break in that long period of time from, essentially it'll be around, I think, 7:50 to 1:30. So we have to figure that out. We have to work on new bus schedules and where staff are going to take breaks, and update support staff afternoon schedules. And we definitely want to work to meet the needs of our kiddos. And so there's just a lot of work that we'll figure out in the next 2 weeks. But our tentative schedule is to start health checks at 7:50. We can get them done in 10 or 15 minutes. So to roughly 8:05. Buses coming in, staggering in throughout that time. So, bus routes will change a little bit, and then we'll start school at 8:15, and we'll make sure kids get a 30-minute lunch, breaks, and increased instruction time, which we're really excited about. So, I'll keep you posted, but I think we have a good handle on things, and we'll just get it done next 2 weeks. So questions on COVID updates. I don't know, David, if there's anything I missed. Vaccines, we're in the
No,
dark.
I think you got it. And I think the nice thing about your report is it pretty much includes everything I would report on. So we've sort of killed two birds with one stone. I was going to mention the vaccines, but we're still waiting. We've checked in with, we've got great folks who are helping us sort through that at Mount Escutney. And it looks like staff wise, and it's going to be a while. And it looks like when Vermont does the vaccines, it is going to be by age band with some level of, but anyhow, we don't know yet, but I'm not expecting that anybody will be vaccinated except for our nurses who already have and our LNAs, but the rest of us, I'm not expecting until probably February vacation, maybe, or shortly thereafter.
We have had our SLPs and our OTs vaccinated.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that our SLPs, SLPAs, and OTs and PTs were included in that round with Mount Escutney. Many of them actually went today. So,
Great.
And that was and that's happened from what I understand. I checked with our regional directors all across the state for district folks who meet that criteria. So, which is good to get their foot in the door just a little bit more.
That's great.
And
Have you heard anything from the rec if they're going to change their programming?
John, I've kept him in the loop. Yeah, he'll adjust the time that kids get there. I don't know if he'll extend it. You mean on the back end, Beth, like the later in the day for pickup?
Yeah. I just didn't know if he was thinking of that. And also any like sports, because I know they were talking about e-runner-esque type stuff happening on Thursdays, and then with the extension.
He, originally we had talked and we had determined that we couldn't, co-sponsor whatever you want to, our relationship for ski runners, the school could not. He was trying to get it to be run through the rec, and I think originally he thought that could happen, and then Suicide Six said no. But they are offering discounted tickets on Thursdays. I don't know. This has started to come up. What the time frame is, with our extended day. I don't know if it will mean kids are getting picked up early to go skiing and how disruptive that might be depending on the numbers of kids that go, because it's not offered, it's not a school-wide program this year. So, we're going to work through that. We, of course, want students to have that opportunity. It does, it's an equity issue. It is an equity issue. So, I wrestle with that and certainly want kids to have that opportunity, but recognize not everybody gets to do it. And if you've got 50 kids leaving at noon and they're all missing class, it does impede learning. So
absolutely. I just was more wondering if
it's
you
all
had heard
parent,
anything from
right?
John.
It's all parent.
It's all parent run for Thursdays. So it would, parents would have to be taking off and going there for the entire time versus last year when, staff would go and we would cover it. So I think, I can't imagine we're going to see nearly even close to the numbers that we saw in the past, just because people have to work, But.
Yeah, we'll figure that out.
Great.
Yeah. So that is the end of the principal's report. I think, David, you're up.
David, your turn.
Yeah, I think I'm just looking at my list. Yeah, no, I think you covered most of it, except we are working on, matter of fact, Nicole and I have maybe you already said this earlier, but have a meeting tomorrow morning with Dave Ormston. I mean, we're still trying to set town meeting dates, get town meeting reports together. Windsor has decided to stay with a virtual meeting and Australian ballot, mail in, and stay with the March 2nd date. But Weathersfield is looking at a May first week in May, and Heartland will talk about it tomorrow morning. I mean, it would be nice to get the two K-8 districts to have the same sort of date, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, I did find that out, that we don't all have to go on the same date. It really is a local decision.
And do we have to vote the same way?
What's that?
It's a local decision on the way we vote as well?
Correct. Correct. Yeah. So I think we'll just work it out in each town. It would be nice to have a little more time to put the town reports together and gear up for the PowerPoint presentation, and maybe things will look a little better in April and May for in-person voting. But, who knows? We'll have to see what David's thinking tomorrow, Nicole, and then we'll report back to everybody. I think that's it. And the only other thing I was going to talk about was the extended day. Matter of fact, it's a separate agenda item, but Christine did a nice job covering that. But we can certainly answer any questions.
And we won't have to do that the budget presentation till the town meeting day is set, correct?
That's correct. And then what we normally do is we normally back up. I think what they've done traditionally is they go with that traditional, town meeting representation. Then I think we've backed up to the Monday night before that, or something like that. Or yeah, so we'll do the same thing. But once we get the date set, then we'll know when our annual meeting will be.
Which, since this is our January meeting, that has sometimes been our February meeting. And I don't, so we'll have to look at when we set the next date. It'll all be in flux.
Yeah. Well, we've usually done one additional meeting to kind of review the PowerPoint, to kind of go over the, your letter if we need to. You usually send that out, but yeah, but we can, I think tomorrow morning's meeting is critical, and then we'll see what the decision is.
And my letter, if town meeting doesn't move, which is the assumption right now, my letter is due next week.
That's correct.
Yeah, exactly.
Just so you know. Right.
So be on the lookout for a quick review for when I finally get it drafted. And I don't have a clue what to say right now, so we'll get there. Okay, David, I'm also curious if you have anything else to say from your superintendent's meetings. I think that you get a little bit of a broader picture at those that I am always interested in hearing.
Yeah, no, we meet mostly in the Southeast, right? And so that's and I will tell you the two things that have come out of those meetings is most of them right now are going to just stay status quo in terms of the schedules, their COVID, all of their plans. I thought it was interesting at the last meeting because we have had some people showing up at our SU meetings, at our local board meetings, talking about all these districts around us that are going full days. But when I surveyed those superintendents, every single one of them, I mean, there are some who are going full days at the K-5 level or the K-6 level. But in those cases, those kids are only going, anywhere from 2 to 4 days a week. There's nobody going 5 days a week. So it all works itself out in a wash. I did not check out, there was one or two other districts that somebody mentioned at our SU meeting, Bradford and one of the others. But our Southeast superintendents all said that they're using hybrid schedules, that they're using that 1 day remote or sometimes 2 days remote. And that's the way that that's working out. And then the other thing, and I think I said this when Ed was talking, that there was a survey done, and quite frankly, at least again in the Southeast, even those schools that are holding their budgets to 1%, 2%, or 3% expenditure increases are just seeing exorbitant tax increases because of that property yield and because of the drop in CLA in a lot of towns, and also that equalized pupil. So I don't know whether the legislature is going to deal with any of that or not, but I think I just don't think you should feel alone. And tomorrow night, somehow we've got to go to Wethersfield, and I mean, I forget what was yours, 13 or 14 cent tax increase. And right now, Weathersfield at a 39-cent tax increase. So it's just, I just don't know what to do. And their tuition budget is up $500,000. So they, if they took that tuition off the table, it would be up a couple of pennies, 3 pennies, 4 pennies. So it's just crazy right now. And I think we're just going to have to get through it.
David, just if I can just ask, did they have a huge number of move-ins as well? Is that why their budget,
Yes.
their tuition budget is up so much?
Yes, they've had a lot. Matter of fact, when the tuition bills came in, well, of course we do the vouchers, right? But there's always people that don't fill out the vouchers. So then we go to the bills. When the bills come in, and BJ, who's been in that school forever, she didn't recognize half the names on that on those tuition bills. So that means people are moving in, and they're moving in, I think, partially part of that northern right traverse because of COVID, but they've got high school students, and some of them have elementary, some of them don't. Some of them just have high school students.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're up a lot of kids, and also tuition is up. I don't know whether Ed mentioned that, but it's, you know, we've got tuitions locally, Hartford, Thetford, they're all going up 10, 12% in tuition hikes. That's a lot when you've got a lot of kids in those schools.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I think is that we're all seeing these increases, and that's reflected in the tuition. And this, you know, the state, it feels like, has to do something to address this issue of the delayed, you know, getting charged for students who you don't get credit for another couple of years, because it just, I mean, that just doesn't feel fair. It doesn't feel, and I think as we think about how to communicate this, we want to really think about how to explain that, you know, it's not just, I mean, tuition is up. It's not just that tuition is up, though. It's that we are responsible for paying tuition for students who we don't get credit for in our equalized pupil count. And that is what is sending us up.
But
And I think it's really important.
That's a good
We're
point.
getting penalized for going over the standard allocation because of all these students that we're not getting credit for.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Did Ed say whether or not we're over the spending threshold this year? Did he mention that or no?
Yeah, we are.
You are? Okay.
We are.
No, don't do it.
We don't get credit for it.
But I think Sarah's point is a good point. You're not getting credit. And by the way, high school credit is a premium, right? Because it's 1.25 for every one student. So you're really losing a lot of equalized pupil dollars there when it lags behind your actual enrollment.
Yeah, but don't those students that have graduated in our district, don't they remain in the equalized pupil formula for 2 more years?
Well, technically they would, but I think what Sarah's saying is that's not helping over the last couple of years when we've seen this spike in move-ins. I think that's part of the problem, right? So if you get 10 families that move in with 12 high school students, you know, even though it's balanced you are protected 3% either way with respect to that equalized pupil. But in this case, you're protected in the wrong direction, right? I mean, if that equalized pupil could go up by that amount, but it doesn't, and I think that does impact the revenue side.
Well, the point I'm trying to make is those families. I don't want to make assumptions. What am I trying to say? They could choose to move again, but those students would remain in our equalized pupil formula for 2 more years.
You know, that would be a good study. I don't know how you do it, but what Scott just said is really important, because I know when I was superintendent in St. Johnsbury, we had what was called very unlovingly the carpetbagger effect. They'd come in for 4 years, they'd get their high school education, then they'd move out, right? And it was a very typical situation. It would be interesting to see if we're not seeing some of that over the last 4 to 5 years. In other words, and I don't mean to be, you know, critical or mean about this, but are they contributing to the community? Are they a a real member of the community, or are they just trying to pay a cheap mortgage? Not a
Wait a
cheap
minute.
mortgage.
I wasn't leaning that way. I'm trying to say that in the formula, even after they graduate, or if
Oh, I see. They stay in the formula, right?
in the formula, if they come to town for 3 years and then parents get an opportunity and the family moves again, or they still stay in the formula. So
Yeah,
it's
they would stay in the formula.
to argue that it's a huge problem when they arrive, because we're just not being, we're not
No,
using.
but it is, because we're being penalized and we don't get that penalty back. So we're paying an extra penalty and our taxpayers are paying an extra penalty. But when they're still in the logs, and so now we have more equalized pupils, then we're just playing the standard. It's not like we get that penalty back.
Right.
Not when you go over the threshold, right?
Right. So we're over the threshold for the last 2 years and we're never going to get that back. And I would argue that this year with 9 move-ins, that's a lot for us to just absorb and say, yeah, no problem, we can cover that.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things the legislature is dealing with, they are dealing with the funding formula in the sense of what should be the variance and the variables, right? I mean, they've been talking about this for 2 years, whether they'll do anything, right? For example, rural districts that have more transportation costs, districts that have a higher poverty rate, we've got some indicator for that, but they're questioning whether or not it's enough. I don't know whether they would, whether the equalized pupil would be played with or not, but I'm trying to remember what the bill is called, but the bill is related to all of that. They think it's time to revisit how that revenue is calculated.
I agree. Okay. Is there anything else you've learned at the superintendent meetings, or is that?
I was just trying to think.
David, I just have a quick question. Did we ever hear anything more about the tuition payment request that was discussed at last meeting?
No. Other than the student that we dealt with last time, that they didn't. There was a motion by. Remember, we're one of 3 supervisory unions that are dealing with this, and 2 of the supervisory unions, they wanted an injunction, but our parent and student withdrew the injunction. So right now it's just status quo. We haven't heard any more. Right now I think your decision will just stand. I met with the attorney today. I mean, he's filing all kinds of paperwork on behalf of these other 2 districts because there was a ruling on the injunction and the ruling was in the favor of the plaintiff. So now the question is, he's getting calls about, okay, when are we getting this tuition reimbursement? But that's not happening with us. So I'll keep you posted if anything changes. But the idea is that this, as we talked about last week, and that this could be a case that very well works its way right up to the Supreme Court, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. And I think that's the hope with some of this stuff. We'll see what happens. But no, he's convinced you made the right decision, and right now it's status quo.
Great. Is the noise back on my computer, just out of curiosity? No. Okay, so my computer fan is fine. It's some random fan in the house that I can't even hear. Okay. So I started an email to remind myself in the morning to email Elizabeth and just highlight what we just discussed about the penalty and the extra students and all of that. So moving on down the list, we are on the last item, which is the anti-racism task force meeting. Or the anti-racism task force. We had a meeting last Monday, part of my Monday meeting series. We reviewed the policy and raised a lot of questions and had a lot of discussion, and it was a really good meeting. And so now it is back on my plate to make the revisions to the policy, send it to David to have Lori make the more mundane, repetitive revisions to the policy, And then Elizabeth is coordinating with potentially a facilitator to help us reach out to our community. And David, also through Elizabeth, is coordinating with VSARN, which stands for
Vermont Anti-Racism Student Network.
Yes. And this was Elizabeth finding, Elizabeth is really good, finding a newspaper article about another school that received a grant from that network. So David's reaching out to them, and that just happened this morning, so we don't have an update probably. So that's kind of where the task force is moving. Colleen, did I miss anything? Does that sound about right? Okay. So we're moving. We are intentionally not moving at breakneck pace because, as an email I sent to David last week, we're in the middle of a lot of different things all at the same time, and it's putting a lot of strain on a lot of us. So we're just trying to keep the ball rolling and do the important work, but not rush the important work because it's too important to rush. With so many other things going on, like budget season. So, that, unless anybody has any questions,
Is there? May we see the draft?
Yeah, I think I have to send the draft to the task force to make sure that we captured everything that we talked about, and then. I don't think we're ready to go fully public with the draft. So I don't know that it's ready to be broadcast at a public SU meeting at this point. I think before, and Christine, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think before we present it as a formal policy, it needs to go to our community members that really want to provide input on it. So the anti-racism task force took it and said, this is how we want to make it ours. And these are the things that, and most of them were just wording things. We didn't change the tenor of it, just made it sound better. And then from there, it's supposed to go to a broader community look before it's presented as a formal policy. But I can send you the draft that we have, just not in a formal SU meeting.
How many districts around the state are part of this effort?
There are a lot of districts.
Yeah, it's multiple. I mean, I don't know exactly, Scott, but it's a lot of them. I know in the Southeast, I can't think of one that's not involved in some effort, and a lot of them have used the righting wrongs, the same organization we used. Most of them are starting with policy. Some of them are more ahead than we are, like Hartford, but I think virtually every single one has an initiative going.
And Elizabeth had said that there's even talk of making it a statewide
initiative
and policy. So so that's not why we're taking it slow so that we get it right, but at the same time, while we're taking it slow, we're also allowing the state time to figure out what they're going to do.
I guess my comment is that even after the whole process that you're in, Nikki, and Colleen, is Colleen in the?
Yeah, Christine and Angie.
Okay, it's still the policy that comes out of that process is still a draft policy to a school district, right? So, and at that point, then the school directors start looking at it and it gets warned 2 or 3 times, or twice, I guess. And then the whole community gets to look at it. And so I guess I would just encourage it to become like a public draft policy, like you can find at the School Boards Association, as soon as possible. So rather than, I know it's brand new, so I think you're caught in it's a tough spot. because you were trying to get it to go prime time in the right way. But
I think for this particular policy, it's important to make it go prime time in the right way. And it's, I think some of our communities are going to find this policy challenging, and we may find it challenging as well. And so we want to have all of our ducks in a row and everybody on board before, so that so we can bring people on board so that they're willing to publicly say that they support what we're doing, rather than surprising anybody with releasing a policy. Angie, are you trying to say something? Or are you just moving your hand around? Okay.
Holding your head up.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I'm ready to look at the next agenda, but as we look at the next agenda, I want to look at the calendar and figure out. So our next meeting would be, we're the third Monday, right? Second Monday.
I think you're the second Monday.
Okay, good, because that was knocking up against President's Day. Okay.
I think we're the third, but we didn't meet on next Monday because of the holiday.
That's what I think too. And then the next one is also a holiday. I think that this is Weathersfield Board Week, right, David?
Well, Weathersfield, they meet on Tuesdays, so.
Right, they're the second Tuesday, I think.
They're the second Tuesday.
Yeah, they used to be the second Monday. I think, so my proposal would be to go with the second Monday, because we are not going to meet on President's Day, I don't think.
Which would be the 8th.
The 8th, yes.
How do people feel about that?
What? Yeah, because the SU board's on the 22nd. So that really, if we're going to stick with a Monday, that's our option. And then town meeting would be the 2nd. So that our town presentation would be the 22nd, because it's the Monday before town meeting, the week before town meeting, right?
That's correct. That's correct. Which is why we'll probably have to move that SU board meeting if you stay with that date.
Okay, so let's make our next meeting the 8th, and then we'll figure out what happens with the SU board and Heartland's town meeting.
Okay. So you want to do the 8th?
Yeah. If everybody, does that make sense to everyone? Okay. Okay, so then we need an agenda. The presentation is going to be, review the presentation. And then so it would be review the budget presentation, the principal's report, the superintendent's report. I'll put COVID updates on here, but I'll assume that they're part of those reports. Sure. And then the anti-racism task force. Is there anything else that I'm missing?
Is there any more discussion around school meals and just the cost allocation and things like that? Because would have the SU board already talked about that?
Yeah, so that would be part of the SU meeting, but we can do an update on school allocation. Okay. And so I should probably ask Amy to put that on the next meeting for the SU. Okay. That, I'm sure will be a full meeting. I don't know what I was thinking today might be short. So if we actually have a meeting that's like only 2 hours, that'll be awesome.
Good luck.
So anything
Did you
else?
say the town meeting is on the 2nd?
Town
Or
meeting
our
is
meeting?
town meeting is the first Tuesday in March.
Okay,
That would be the 2nd, and then we back up a week.
okay.
Because they have their information meeting the Monday night before, right? Or no?
The town?
Oh.
No.
The town does.
It's just a town meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, we have our. I can't remember if ours is Monday or Tuesday.
I think it was Monday.
Yeah. Sarah, you look like you have to say something, or maybe not.
Okay. I was just going to ask if somebody could let us all know when the decision is made about what form Heartland's town meeting will take.
Yeah.
That will sort of tell us a lot, I think, about how we
I
schedule.
thought about that.
Yeah.
We're not going to all be sitting in the Damon Hall together, hashing it out.
Not if it's March.
No.
This could be crazy. Zoom town hall meeting could be potentially
Yeah.
off the chain.
Isn't the legislature like trying to discourage that?
Not legal, not legal, not legal. It's probably problematic. I don't know. Maybe it just makes lawyers nervous.
Yeah. I mean, based on how our board meetings got derailed when we had a massive amount of people on them, I can't imagine what would happen in the town meeting.
Yeah, I don't think.
Yeah.
You get good attendance probably, but
Or you could just do it out on the green.
you could do that. That's what Weathersfield's thinking about. They
Out behind the rec.
they think by April or May they could go outside.
Probably have to wear our muck boots.
Muck boots and masks.
Yeah. Okay, I think I could take a motion to. Wendy, did you get the agenda? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Oh, one thing I just remember. So Colleen and I are running again.
Yes.
So if you guys need to know. And Colleen, I think you're gonna do a 3-year term.
I am.
You'll do the 2. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it seems like that's what you guys do is swap them up. I don't.
Yeah, that's what we're doing.
I'm fine either way.
So you don't have to get signatures this year. You just have to notify the town
Yeah,
clerk.
that's nice.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, is that how it is?
Yeah, you just
Yeah.
need to make sure your name is on the ballot.
Wow, that's easy.
That's easy.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, okay.
You still
I moved to adjourn.
have to notify the town by the end of late in January?
I think
January
that will all
25th.
depend on the town meeting, but I think it's by January 25th, according to Amy McMullen in Windsor, but I think you need to let them know by January 25th.
That's what Brian told us.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, I'll take a motion. Beth,
Motion.
second.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay,
Yeah.
all those in favor of calling it a night.
Yeah. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Good night.
you.
Good night. Thanks, Angie, for covering.